This video will present the formulas for the volume of a cylinder, cone, and sphere. Take a moment to jot down in your notebook the formula for the volume of a cylinder. I want to point out two things. There are two formulas that you can write down in your formula. The first formula looks like this. Volume equals, this big B stands for the area of the base times the height. So volume is the area of the base times the height, or the other more specific formula you could jot down is volume equals pi times r squared times h. Another formula that sometimes students like to write down because they goof up the r squared is this formula. Volume equals pi times r times r times h. Whichever formula makes the most sense to you, jot that formula down while you press pause on this video. The formula I'm going to choose to use is the second one. Volume equals pi times r squared times h. That's the one that makes the most sense to me. Now, if you choose another formula, if you do your math right, we'll get the same answer. All right, for starters, I need to know two pieces of information for my cylinder. I need to know my radius, which is r, and I need to know the height of my cylinder. So when I go over here to the diagram, I can see this right here is my radius. If it was a diameter, it would go all the way across. It's a radius because it goes from the center of the circle to the outside. So I know 5 is my radius. 8 is my height because it goes from one base to the other. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in my formula, and I just want to point out that the first step anytime I'm using a formula is to write the formula down. So that's a must. Step 2 is just to go ahead and fill in the pieces of information that I have. Now, in this volume section, we're going to ask that you use 3.14 for pi. So I'm going to write 3.14 for pi times 5 squared times my height, which is 8. All right, I'm going to go ahead and plug that into the calculator. Now, if you are using this formula, you just need to be extra careful with the squared. Make sure you square the 5 and not the entire expression. All right, so when I type in 3.14 times 5 squared times 8, my answer is 628. Now, the only thing I'm missing here is a label. If I go back and I look at my diagram, neither the 5 nor the 8 is labeled. So if that's the case, I have to use the generic label of U for unit. And because this is volume, volume is raised to the power of 3. So my final answer would be read as volume equals 628 cubic units. Here are your two options for the formula for the volume of a cone. Notice that one formula has a 1/3 in it, so 1/3 times pi r squared times h, and the other one has pi r squared times h divided by 3. Jot both of them down in your notebook, and you can choose which formula you want to use for your homework and on your tests and quizzes, whichever formula you think would be easiest for you to work with. Now, I want to point out one thing. This formula looks awfully familiar to the formula for the volume of a cylinder. In the formula for a volume of a cylinder, it's pi r squared times h. In a cone, I divide by 3 or take 1/3 of it because as you look over here in this diagram, you can see that a cone is roughly 1/3 of the volume of a cylinder. Actually, I said roughly, but it's exactly 1/3 of the volume of a cylinder that has the same radius and the same height. To calculate the volume of a cone, go ahead and jot down the formula that you're going to use. For me, I like the second formula best, so that's the one I'm going to choose. Again, if you do your work correctly, it won't matter which formula you pick. From here, go ahead and jot down your radius and your height. Substitute those values into your formula. All right, I selected, again, the second formula because I think that's going to work best for me. So I went ahead and jotted that down. Then I substituted my radius and my height into the formula. In the next step, I went ahead and I carried out my operations in the numerator. I did 3.14 times 2 squared times 5, and I got 62.8. Then I'm going to take that value, divide it by 3, and my final answer for volume is 20.93 cubic centimeters. Take a moment to jot down both formulas for the volume of a sphere. Just want to point out that the first one is 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed, which is different than squared in our other two formulas. Or the other choice that you could use for a formula is 4 times pi times r cubed in the numerator divided by 3. Go ahead, jot those formulas down. Now the formula that I choose to use is the second one. So I'm going to jot down 4 times pi. Actually, I'm going to put 3.14 in there right away. Times my radius, which is 11 cubed. Remember, that's to the power 3, not squared, divided by 3. Go ahead and plug these values into your calculator and solve for the volume. All right, when I go ahead and plug the values or the numbers in my numerator into my calculator, in my numerator I get 16,717.36 in my numerator. When I divide that by 3, my final answer is 5,572.45 cubic centimeters. So it's really important that you go ahead and you label your answer. If you have any questions on how to cube a number or use your exponent key in your calculator, see your teacher. There's a shortcut key in your calculator so you don't have to do 11 times 11 times 11. One final reminder when you're calculating the volume of a cylinder and a cone is when you look at the shape of the base, you need to make sure you study the dimensions that you're given. So for example, you need a radius in both of those. And just as a final reminder, remember the radius goes from the center of the circle to the outside edge of the circle. All right, the diameter is going to cut all the way through. So if you're given the diameter of a circle, let's say it's 10, you need to know that the radius is half of that, or 5. The last thing I want to point out is that when you're looking at a cone, the height of the cone goes from the center of the base to the tip of the cone or the top of the cone, depending on the position of it. That's the height. This right here, this dimension, this is referred to as the slant height. So if you are given the dimensions of a cone, and let's say you were not given this dimension, you were given the slant height, 10 does not substitute in the value for the height. So then you'd have to go ahead and calculate the distance or the length of the actual height. I hope everybody recognizes that this is a right triangle, and as a review would remember to use the Pythagorean theorem to calculate the actual height. All right, that's it. Those are some extra tips and tricks when calculating the volume of a cone, a cylinder, and a sphere.